Has a trap been set for the Denver Broncos at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in London? Can the Colorado Avalanche afford to play the waiting game with one of their top six wingers? And are some potential frustrations and lingering issues from last hockey season already showing up again in the 2025 NHL season? All things to come on today's rundown, but we begin with a special shout out to our friends at Denver Regenerative Medicine. Guys, if weight loss has been a struggle for you, it's time for something real. At Denver Regenerative Medicine, they use full-strength GLP-1 medications with doctor oversight. You can start today with a free consultation and get real results for under $300 a month. Book now at denverregen.com. We have a lot to get into today as it relates to the Denver Broncos and the Colorado Avalanche, who get their home opener party started tonight. And to discuss it all, we will welcome in once again our friend of the show and Denver sports analyst to the stars, Will Peterson. Scrappy Will, how you doing, man?
I'm great, Richie. It's good to be back. Just chatted with you a couple days ago, and I always love coming on the rundown, particularly when you've got a massive Broncos game and a big Avs game all right around the corner.
Yeah, a couple of big games here in town. Well, I guess not here in town for the Denver Broncos, as they are across the pond in London to play the winless New York Jets. And I think the trajectory of the two teams, the Broncos coming off of maybe their most signature win in the entire Sean Payton Bo Nix era, Super Bowl defending Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles, the Jets seeking their first win of the season, the Aaron Glenn experience and Justin Fields era not starting off as smoothly as they would probably hope. And it's setting up a little bit of a dynamic here, Will, that's having some people question whether or not this game, which kicks off in the early hours of Sunday morning, is a trap game for the Denver Broncos. They just experienced the highest of the high. They've got what should be kind of like the Bengals game, a little bit of a laugher or a snoozer on paper.
Yep.
But it doesn't always tend to play out that way. Do you have any hairs sticking up on the arms here about this weekend's game?
No, I don't, and I hope I don't regret it, because let's be honest, what have the Broncos done really well, particularly with Sean and Bo? They've beaten bad teams, and they've beaten them pretty handily. You look at Cincy this year, you look at Atlanta, Carolina, Indy last year when the Colts were falling off. The Denver Broncos seem to handle business. The CBS team showed the stat on Sunday. There's something like 11-1 in games decided by 8 points or more.
Yeah.
They don't, for all their shortcomings in the close, tight games, which have kind of been washed based on the Eagles win at least one time, they don't seem to struggle with inferior opponents. They seem to just handle their business. And I think that's a product of Sean Payton coaching in the NFC South for all those years. Let's be honest, it's not been the strongest division historically. So the Saints probably had 4, 5, 6 games a year where they felt like we need to just go handle business. Sean instilled it in his players down there, and now he's doing it with the Broncos. I think the Jets are just really bad. I know Sean had the quote yesterday, we don't get to play any Division II schools or whatever he said. And then we're kind of joking, well, if there is a Division II school in the NFL, it is the New York Jets. I mean, I understand they were relatively close against the Buccaneers. They played the Steelers tight in week 1, but they've also gotten blown out a couple times this year by the Bills and the Cowboys. Philip Lindsay, who hosts the Drive on 104.3 The Fan, mentioned yesterday, these dudes know they're not making the playoffs. They're looking at this as a vacation. They're going overseas to collect a check. And guess what? Last night, midnight, I guarantee the Broncos were fast asleep in their little quiet hotel out in the middle of nowhere. I don't know if I can guarantee that about the Jets. They may have been out there living it up, doing the nightlife thing in London. I'm not trying to tell our audience that, they're just going to roll, nothing to see here. But I kind of think they're just going to roll, nothing to see here.
Well, you are right when you're talking about the Denver Broncos and how they handle games over the course of last season going into this season relative to their opponent, it's a nice little Sean Payton nod there. They either blew out bad teams.
Sorry,
Yes.
It took me a second.
Yes.
Relative to. Yes.
Yeah, in our league, Will, we as the Denver Broncos either blow out inferior opponents. That's where you get the James Merlats of the world that love to point out that you can rough up the JV squads in the NFL. So they either blew out bad teams or lost one-score games to everybody else.
Yep.
So there is kind of two ends of the spectrum there. And just like I kind of felt going into the Bengals game, I didn't think that was a trap game either. I was definitely someone who was more not in favor of, but not as dismissive of Jake Browning, who's been in that system in Cincinnati for a while and has, had, I guess, for backup quarterback terms, some level of success to be able to hold on to that role. It didn't turn out to be the case. That game was a laugher. It was really never in doubt after the first series where Cincinnati came down and scored a field goal. But I will say this. Just like Thursday Night Football, London games are weird. There is something about going overseas, changing your body clock, having to adjust your routine. You're playing at a normal time overseas, but a very early time here domestically, stateside. And it does feel like games that appear on paper to be lopsided in nature or have the potential to be a blowout end up going kind of quirky and in different directions. And I think Thursday Night Football, because of the truncated preparation approach there, is similar. So I don't think that this Broncos-Jets game sets up to be a trap game. And that's one of my reasons is I also just don't know, and I mean this in the most respectful way possible, I don't know if the Broncos are good enough to really stumble and fall into a trap game. I mean, they had games against the Titans and the Colts to start the season that they should have probably won, and in some cases won going away. The Tennessee Titans probably might not be the New York Jets, but they're probably not going to be, much higher than that in the draft order when Tankathon starts releasing all of their listings. And they beat the Titans by 8, and it was kind of an ugly rock fight to get there. They lose to the Colts on a walk-off. They lose to a good team in the Chargers on a walk-off. I just don't know if this team has put together enough of a body of work or a sample size that tells me, oh, yeah, they're in danger of overlooking an opponent and falling for a trap game. I just don't know that they're there yet.
Yeah, no, I think that's an interesting point of like the Broncos aren't good enough to just say, well, we had one good win against the Eagles, so we can just roll out of bed and go beat the Jets. They're still going to take this game seriously. And I think you heard that from Sean and Bo yesterday talking about there's no such thing as a trap game in the NFL. And I think, too, the fan base believed, if you will, for lack of a better word, going into this year. And then we got our hearts ripped out against the Colts and the Chargers, and we're like, ugh, Sean was talking about the Super Bowl. This team still can't win, yada, yada, yada. And then the Eagles game just changed everything in the fan base. It was like, whoa, maybe he's not crazy to be talking about the Super Bowl. Maybe when we do get help from the Commanders and the Jaguars, the AFC West is going to be ours because they can run it to 4-2, 5-2, 6-2 based on the schedule. And I think that belief that the fan base, that Broncos country is feeling when you walk around town right now, I think that absolutely is bled into the players too. And they know, Richie, if they somehow lay an egg on Sunday, it undoes all the goodwill from the Eagles win. Everything that you did right in Philadelphia, you flush down the drain if you somehow lose to the 0-5 Jets. And I just get the vibe from the players that they know that as well. They're taking it seriously as well, that you're only as good as your last game, and momentum is fickle. And the only way to keep this momentum up is to go win on Sunday. And I just think this Denver Broncos team is too mature, has good enough leaders, and is smart enough to take the Jets lightly. Now, hopefully in the fourth quarter they are, because they're up 3 touchdowns. But I just see no reason why this game's not going to be a laugher by, let's call it 9:30, 10 a.m. Mountain Time on Sunday morning.
It certainly could be. And if it's going to be, they're going to have to, they and Sean Payton and the Broncos are going to have to find a way to continue the success in the ground game that they've experienced through the first 5 weeks of the season. And the only reason that may be somewhat in jeopardy or in question is because of the injury to Ben Powers on the offensive line. He's going to be expected to miss probably a couple of months. We're looking at a December, maybe even Christmas time sort of return as he recovers from the surgery that he had this week. How much, if any, is there a blow or an impact to the run game, which J.K. Dobbins and secondarily R.J. Harvey have kind of revived here in Denver without Ben Powers in the lineup?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question because I'm not trying to poo-poo Ben Powers. He's been here since 2023, started all 40 games. But if you had to power rank the offensive line, I think Quinn Miners and Garrett Bowles are a coin flip for 1-2. Quinn was an all-pro, and Bowles all of a sudden looks like maybe the best left tackle in the NFL. And then you look at Mike McGlinchey, and yeah, he's got some things in his game that he needs to clean up, but I think his leadership, his veteran presence, being on a championship contender year in and year out with the Niners, I mean, those to me are the clear top 3. Again, not trying to dismiss Powers, but if I was going to lose anyone, it would have been him or Luke Wattenberg. Plus, the Broncos are deep on the O-line. We heard Quinn Miners talking about that yesterday of like, it sounds a little harsh, but it really is next man up. We wish Ben the best in his recovery, but you've got Alex Palczewski. We saw Matt Pert again out there working with the left guard or at the left guard position today over there in London. I don't want to do the whole, they'll be fine because, again, Powers is a good player. But put it this way, I'd be a lot more nervous if we were talking about Miners or Bulls sitting here today.
I agree with you on that. Listen, I'm not going to disagree or push back on the fact that if you were power ranking the Broncos offensive lineman, that Ben Powers is probably not on the podium.
Nope.
You know, we're not talking the top 3, or if so, he's 3. And it's also true that when you're looking at the run chart for the Denver Broncos and where they have the most success running behind each of the offensive line, their 2 most successful spots are, as you can guess, the 2 players you alluded to, running right behind Quinn Miners and running outside alongside Garrett Bowles. Those are the 2 areas that they have success, and it's a pretty decent gap, in my opinion, between those 2 spots and everywhere else. So Ben Powers wasn't necessarily a highly graded offensive guard in pass protection, and he's been better in run protection, but it's not their biggest area of strength as a team. And they are deep along the offensive line, but if I was going to give a little bit of pushback, I would say that they're deep on the offensive line at everywhere except guard. All of their backup guards are not guards by trade. Palczewski, Matt Pert, Frank Crum, all offensive tackles and swing tackles. Then you've got Alex Forsythe and your starting center, Luke Wattenberg, who can also play guard along the interior offensive line, but it's not their natural position or necessarily their best fit. So I'm not hitting a panic button. We're not at DEFCON 1 or 2. But I am with a little bit of a raised eyebrow going, oof, okay, because their success or failure at replacing Ben Powers for not just 1 week or 2 weeks, but potentially the majority of the season going forward, when you talk about games played on the front end and the back end, at least half the season or so is what it could be. That could present, if they're unable to slot that in with a Palcio or Matt Pert, as we've seen from the videos over there at London, and keep the ship rolling and smoothly and keep the train on the tracks, that does present something for me of a roadblock to an offense that has kind of stumbled out of the gate of every game for the last 2 or 3 seasons.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair, because if it becomes Sunday afternoon, you're looking at the box score and J.K. Dobbins had 17 carries for 47 yards or whatever, you're going to go, whoa, they clearly missed Ben Powers, because Dobbins has been a top 5 back in the NFL through the first 5 weeks of the season. So yeah, it's something to watch. It's something to monitor. The good news is it feels like every time you turn on a Jets game, they're giving up 35, 40 points. So hopefully it doesn't become an issue now, but you're right. All of a sudden you look at the schedule in November and it's the Texans and it's the Chiefs. This guy's not going to be back until Santa's coming to town. And even me, that feels optimistic. Normally when you hear biceps in sports, that's kind of a death sentence, but Mike Kliss is firmly reporting they're expecting December, but they're going to play tougher opponents than the Jets, put it that way, without Ben Powers. So hopefully we're looking at another 100-yard games from Dobbins this weekend and thinking, okay, they're going to be all right. And then obviously when the opponents get tougher, we'll have to see how that line holds up without him.
Shifting gears to the Colorado Avalanche, Will, who are set to take on the Utah Mammoth, who definitely did not steal a team name, even though the logo and the jerseys are pretty sick, from our town, our team here in town with the Mammoth in lacrosse. Will, the storyline that we talked about earlier this week has become even more of a focal point because of recent transactions in the NHL that took place, and it centers around Martin Necas, the crown jewel of the Mikko Rantanen trade, coming back from the Carolina Hurricanes along with Jack Drury and some draft picks. And the deja vu feeling that history might repeat itself is valid, because Necas, going into the final year of the contract that Colorado inherited, is up for extension. He has played well enough through the back half of 2024 and started off pretty well in LA in the season opener to say, hey, if this guy decides to and chooses to go to market, he could command a pretty penny, and it may even match or eclipse what you might have paid Mikko Rantanen if you could go back in the Wayback Machine and do it all over again for Chris McFarland. So, Will, can the Colorado Avalanche afford to play the waiting game for much longer with Martin Necas, given the contracts that have already gone out? When you look around the NHL and you see Connor McDavid obviously signs his 2-year, $25 million contract. Kyle Connor inks with Winnipeg at $12 million a year over 8 years. Same with Jack Eichel in Vegas. So besides the bread man, Arturi Panarin, and Martin Necas, there's not a lot of other free agents out there that are left, which means that they get to sap up the biggest portion of the free agent market that's left, and the teams that are still figuring themselves as suitors.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating, because I've said they need to get this done. They need to get it done. I wish they had gotten it done in July. They didn't for whatever reason. And now Martin Necas is looking around the league going, my price is going up, 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 up. I mean, I think Chris McFarland, the Avalanche GM, was probably thrilled that Necas had 2 goals in game 1. But also, I think if you had sat down with him in private, he goes, I wish Brock Nelson had scored 2 goals for me. Or, you know what I'm saying? Like, he wants Necas to play well. He wants the Avs to win. But, oh, my gosh, what a perfect storm. If you win 4-1, half the goals come from Necas, and neither was a lucky goal, if you will, or off a skate or anything. No. I mean, they were both snipes. They were both absolute snipes from Necas, clean past Darcy Kemper, and it just scares me because I've said it all along, and I'll say it again. New Year's Eve, to me, just feels like the deadline, if you will, for Necas, because I don't want the calendar to flip to 2026, the trade deadline to start to loom, and this to be a thing. But that said, I'm getting closer and closer to moving that up to December 1st or November 1st, because all this money's getting handed out all over the NHL. You showed the great graphic. Kaprizov as well, getting a ridiculous 17 from the Wild. I don't know what the heck Minnesota's doing, but it just like the sense of urgency is getting increased, right? Like the New Year's Eve thing sounded fine a week ago, and now all of a sudden it's like, I'm moving this up more and more and more. It's to the point, Richie, where every time I'm on Twitter, I'm hoping some big national reporter is Avs and Martin Necas getting close. Like we're at the urgency standpoint of like, let's do it today. Let's do it tomorrow. Let's do it this week. Let's not just keep kicking the can down the road. Because guess what? You kicked the can down the road with Mikko Rantanen, and that ended up blowing up in their faces.
Yeah, there's certainly a school of thought that I wouldn't say I disagree with that said, hey, you should have got this deal done with Necas before Jack Eichel and before Connor. But they didn't. And I don't know how much, kind of like we talked about with Nick Bonito, right? About how much, well, Myles Garrett signed this deal, and then TJ Watt, and then you've got all these contracts. Well, now Nick Bonito's price, Micah Parsons, that just drove it up to, Nick Bonito's going to get $35 million a year.
Yeah.
No.
Didn't happen.
And there's part of me that thinks that that's probably going to be the case with Necas as well. He is younger than like an Artemi Panarin, or a Connor McDavid, but at 26 years old, he's still going to command a decent enough price and probably a term length, which I'm sure he would like, and the Avalanche would probably like at that 7-8 year mark, which especially at the 8-year mark is only something he can get with the Avs as of now, and would have to tempt the market and take a year less and hope that you make it up with the AAV. Will, I think the sense of urgency is real, but I think that a deal will get done. And that's why in the back of my mind, I'm trying to tell myself, like, hey, whether it's December 1st or it's New Year's. Now, if the calendar turns to 2026, that's going to make things a little itchy for me included. But I think that Chris McFarland is operating into this season in 2025 with the full intention to not let history repeat itself because of the optics of the way it happened on the back end. And I think that's why he was comfortable being vague and non-committal at media day when he was asked about it, because I think they're going to be able to get something done. I think Necas is optimistic and of the mind to want to get something done. It's not a guarantee, and I'm not necessarily saying he should feel that way, because, Will, if this guy decides to test the open market, he could get north of $12 or $13 million a year from another team.
Yeah, no, he could get big money from someone else, but it just comes down to the age-old winning versus money thing, and we've seen it in sports many a times where guys choose the money over the winning, but Martin Necas could get 14, 15 from, I don't know, the Sharks or the Ducks.
Just takes one team.
Or the Sabres or the Blue Jackets. But it's like, do you really want to go play and live in those markets where you're going to be fighting and clawing for 75, 80 points a year? Or do you want to be in Colorado during the prime of your career where you can go out and get 100-plus points and compete for cups every single season? It's one to watch for sure. And again, we're all happy he got the 2 goals, but I think the Avs are just feeling like the pressure on the front office just notched up that much more.
Can I ask you a question, Will, that I already know off the top you're going to disagree with me on?
Sure.
If we look forward into our crystal ball and Chris McFarland and Necas' camp agree to an extension that pays him $12 to $12.5 million a year over 8 years, a virtual exact replica of what the Dallas Stars extended Mikko Rantanen on, do you feel like it will reflect poorly on Chris McFarland and the Avalanche and make you and plenty of others think that they should have just kept Mikko in the first place?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Unfortunately, that's kind of what the direction it's trending. And, if Necas goes out in the playoffs this year and starts having hat tricks or starts having great series, then that can flip that narrative over. But if tomorrow the news breaks, he's doing 8 for 96, people are going to go, Why'd you pay the lesser player 8 for 96 when the guy you could have paid 8 for 96 got a hat trick in game 7 in the third period to end your season? Yeah, no, they are not going to be received real kindly if he gets the same deal as Mikko Rantanen. Now, that said, narratives can change come April, May, June, but the immediate reaction is going to be backlash, and I certainly understand why.
I will say this right off the rip. I don't think that if the Avalanche come to terms, if and when they come to terms with Martin Necas, that he will be paid an average annual value of 12 to 12.5 million. I think it will be less than that.
It feels high. I mean, I think the guy, is a great player, but gosh, if you could get him for 9.5, 10, I think Avalanche
which was
fans,
the original plan. That was the thought process.
Would be thrilled.
Was that
especially with Cale Makar looming
correct.
Next summer, and he's going to be the massive
The original
priority.
thought process was you could extend Necas and pay Necas on the extension what you were paying Mikko Rantanen pre-extension.
Correct.
Right in that $9 to $10 million range. Maybe it costs you more like 10 and 11 than 9 to 10, but I don't know that it'd get to 12 to 12.5. Even if it does, Will, and this is where I know you and I are going to disagree, I still don't think it would reflect poorly, and it wouldn't make me say they should have just paid Mikko the 12 to 12.5. Because moving on from Mikko and putting Necas in that spot at the dollar figure that was effectively half of what Mikko's extension would have been allowed you to bring in Brock Nelson. It allowed you to bring in Charlie Coyle. It allowed you to bring in Jack Drury, who was a pretty elite fourth-line center last season, is playing on the third line so far this season. Brock Nelson, you extended to be your second-line center. Charlie Coyle didn't remain with the team, but you moved him along with a Miles Wood contract that you wanted to get away from to Columbus to bring in a guy like Gavin Brindley, who I think, at least in a regular season setting, is going to be valuable. It also allowed you to move on from Casey Middlestat, who you wanted to get rid of, and a lot of pieces that went in and out came because of that move. So if Necas then retroactively gets the same amount of money, but it allowed you to do all those things that McFarland wheeled and dealed in 2024 and roll them forward, I still think the sum of the parts is greater in that scenario than it would have been if you paid Mikko and you were trying to do all those things this past offseason going into 2025.
I mean, they won 3 playoff games last year, so I'm not going to get real excited about that. It's mission 16W, and Chris McFarland moved all these pieces around to win 3 playoff games and lose in the first round again. So maybe long-term you're right, because if they go hoist the cup this year, then it all worked out. But I can't sit here in October and agree with what you're getting at, because the Avalanche epically failed last season. And I'm excited to talk about this season and moving forward. But just because you shuffled the chairs on the Titanic or whatever doesn't mean it worked out. You still gagged a game 7 and you won 3 lousy playoff games. So I like your glass half full that down the road, this is all going to work and it's all going to make sense. But this moment in time, I still can't sit here and defend it, particularly if Nate just gets the exact same deal.
Quickly here on the way out, Will, you will be in the building at Ball Arena tonight for the home opener against Utah. I asked you the same question before the season opener against LA. Give me the number one thing. It can be a positive or a concern that you're looking for tonight for the Avalanche.
Yeah, it's how Gabe Landeskog responds, right? He only played, 12 minutes or so the other night, only had, I believe, 90 seconds or so on the ice in the third period.
2 shifts totaling 90 seconds in the third period.
Yeah, so I know he had the scary collision at the blue line when he was trying to get out of the zone to avoid an offside, but just how's Gabe look? I know he's at morning skate this morning, which is obviously a massive positive, don't get me wrong, but I hope he can play 15, 16 minutes tonight. Looks healthy. The knee looks good. And the Avalanche improved to 2-0 with 4 points on this young season.
I don't hate the idea of quote-unquote load managing Gabe by mixing in Ross Colton during games where you have comfortable enough leads to do so and giving him rest in between games or in between periods versus taking entire games off the way we see in the NBA. But I will agree with you. I think 90 seconds on a shift and a little bit of inconsistency was a little jarring to me. I think there's probably a happy medium there. If I was to pick one thing that I'm looking for, it's a familiar concern that we talked about last season that certainly manifested itself against Dallas. It's that the Avs have got to be better on the power play. 1 for 6 against LA, 6 total shots across that period of time. I know Nate just got his second goal on the power play there to kind of cap off his impressive night. But overall, Will, the special teams portion, specifically the power play unit for the Avs, has just not been good enough. And if it continues to linger more into this season and feel a lot like last season, I don't think that's a conversation that's going to be going away.
Yeah, no, we'll have to watch it tonight for sure. It's only been one game. I'm willing to give it some time, but yeah, a couple power play goals tonight would make everyone take a deep breath.
All right, that is all the time that we have for today. Thank you all so much for joining us. Make sure you like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us across all of our social medias, X, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, where you can consume all the great content that we have socially here for you. All the great written content from guys like Will and Jake and Trent Finnegan and Andrew Mason and all the clips from our radio shows where you can kind of cross-platform view all of the amazing talent that we have here at Denver Sports 104.3 The Fan. We will catch you again tomorrow at noon for the next rundown.
I do what I love what I do. Second nature to put in the work.